Hey guys, what's going on? So today we're talking about QTE. QTE is short for Quick Time Event. You'll see the flashing Valkyrie icon when you can perform a QTE. Obviously, hinting at its name, you have to act quickly, as you can only perform a QTE while the enemy is under the influence of the QTE trigger. There are, as far as I know, 6 QTE triggers. These include Float, Freeze, Stun, Paralysis, and Time Slow. The 6th one is special to Memento, which requires you to break the shield of an elite enemy, which is the small yellow bar under a higher tier enemy. I won't be listing every possible trigger source, but the more notable and easy to acquire ones. If you have any suggestions for other sources, make sure to leave a comment below. Starting with the float status, this is probably the best QTE trigger to have, as many Valkyries can do this easily with their normal attacks and don't require any special weapons, their ultimate, or even ultimate evasions. Contrary to its name, the enemy doesn't actually need to be floating. Performing an attack that would knock up a small enemy on something like a shield broken Ganesha will still activate the potential to perform a QTE as shown here. I'll be using Snowy Sniper as the float triggered QTE. I personally like using Scarlet Fusion's charge attack to lift enemies, as it's quick and doesn't have any prerequisites. There are several options though, including Miko, mini Raiden Maze, mini Kiana's, and some weapon skills as well. You shouldn't have a problem finding a way to float an enemy. Next, we're looking at the freeze trigger. Totally opposite of float, this is probably the worst trigger to have. But thankfully, only 2 Valkyries currently in Global have it as a trigger. A third will come when Theresa gets released. Currently, the only 2 who need a freeze to trigger their QTEs are Kiana Ranger and Valkyrie Triumph. For the following examples, I'll be using Valkyrie Ranger as the freeze-triggered QTE. The main problem is that there are very few ways to inflict the freeze status. If you're not using Snowy Sniper, which can freeze with her ultimate, ultimate evasion, and float triggered QTE, your options are very limited. The Water Spirit Type 2 weapon for Kiana, and the Crystal Edge weapon for Mei and Yae Sakura can freeze with their skill. Moving on to stun, it's more or less the same story as freeze. There aren't too many that can easily inflict it. One very notable example, however, is the Colt Peacemaker that Kiana can use. It's a base 2-star weapon, so its stats won't be super impressive, but it may be one of the best guns in the game due to its low cost, low cooldown stun effect. For the following examples, I'll be using Shadow Dash as the stun triggered QTE, As a side note, this gun is one of a kind, so if you haven't made the mistake of getting rid of it, definitely don't. Besides that, Divine Prayer can stun with her switch skill, not the same as a QTE, as long as the enemy is in the air when she gets swapped in. There's no prompt for this like with QTEs, so it's easy to forget. Valkyrie Ranger also has a chance to stun enemies with her combo attack if she lands a crit with it. Ultimately, that's a somewhat low chance. Next, we're looking at Paralysis. Again, in the same vein as Freeze and Stun, but with a couple more options. For the following examples, I'll be using Divine Prayer as the Paralysis triggered QTE. Scarlet Fusion can paralyze with her ultimate evasion. Lightning Empress can paralyze with her QTE, but most notable is the Ronaldo M Stigmata. Since Stigmata can be equipped to anyone, Paralysis is a pretty easy QTE trigger as long as you're willing to give that spot to Ronaldo. Ronaldo M is somewhat easy to activate as long as you have a bit of crit rate, and it has a very short cooldown. And lastly, we have Time Slow, also referred to as Time Fracture. For the following examples, I'll be using Scarlet Fusion as the Time Slow triggered QTE. This is also triggered by many things, including Divine Prayer's ultimate, Ultimate Evasion, Valkyrie Triumph's ultimate, Void Blade's weapon skill, along with other skills. Divine Prayer is by far the best when it comes to this, since you can use her ultimate evasion practically back to back once it's raised high enough. And that pretty much wraps up QTE triggers. When choosing your team, it's very important to keep QTEs in mind so they have synergy and can work off each other. If you absolutely need to use someone like Valkyrie Ranger who needs a freeze to activate her QTE, then you should consider Snowy Sniper. And since Snowy Sniper's QTE is float triggered, you have many options for the third spot. The third spot should be someone whose QTE can be triggered by either Snowy Sniper or Valkyrie Ranger though, such as another freeze triggered QTE, a stun triggered QTE, or if either is equipped with Ronaldo Im, you could take a Paralysis triggered QTE as well. That's just an example though, and everyone's experience will vary depending on the core Valkyries they like to use. But that's it for this video. Again, if you have any suggestions for QTE triggers or even Valk combinations that complement each other, make sure to drop them in the comments below. Also, leaving a like if you did happen to enjoy is always greatly appreciated. Thanks, as always, for watching, and until next time.